Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here. I hope you are staying safe and staying inside as much as possible. And if you are outside like I was this weekend, I hope you're wearing a mask and social distancing as much as possible. This weekend, when I'm recording this, is one of those rare weekends in New York lately where it's been very nice out. So as a result of that, all matter of taking quarantine seriously has gone out the window. And I'm including myself in that as well. Even though I was wearing a mask the entire time I was outside, I did venture on a walk to Manhattan with some friends over the weekend, mostly out of curiosity to see that it was still there, and then journeyed back shortly thereafter. But the sheer volume of people that I saw in parks this weekend was staggering, which does not give me a lot of hope for this ending anytime soon. But it was good and I'm also very excited. I figured out how to wear my mask and my glasses without my glasses fogging up. So I was very excited to finally crack that puzzle, because that was my biggest my biggest frustration with venturing outside with the wearing the mask, because you have to wear a mask to go in anywhere in New York now. Was figuring out how to wear the glasses. And what I figured out, what works for the kind of mask I have, is I wear it very high up on my nose, but in a way that my mouth is still covered, and I position my glasses in such a way where my breath, when I exhale, comes out closer to my forehead and doesn't actually hit my glasses too much. So that's a little tip, because the other tips of getting one with the metal, I don't have a mask that has the metal tabs on the nose, and washing my glasses with soap didn't work, but this did. So enough about current events, because I know some of you might be trying to get away from that today. My guest on the show today is comedian Rob Cantrell. Rob, you might remember from the very first season of Last Comic Standing. He was in the top 10 on the first season of that show, and he is what I call a surreal, hilarious, silly, positive goofball. Like, his comedy, I can never not laugh when I see him, and I've seen him perform around New York numerous times, and he always just has such incredible jokes and such a fun demeanor on stage that it's kind of hard not to enjoy. And he has an album out now, which we're going to talk about in the interview, and I'll link to it in the description. And this was just a really great track. There's a lot of talk about the San Francisco comedy scene, which I kind of mythologize in my comedy nerddom. So there's a lot of great talk about the clubs in town and the scene in San Francisco when it comes to stand up. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you guys. If you enjoy this show, I want to hear from you. So I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. Feel free to send me a message. Even if you think I suck, if you could be hilarious and specific in the way I suck, that would be great, because then other people who might enjoy this will find out why they enjoy it as well. So I'm happy that you guys are here. I appreciate you listening. I hope you're doing well. And let's go to my chat with comedian Rob Cantrell. All right, and we're doing it. Rob Cantrell, thank you so much for doing this, man. I appreciate you taking the time.
No worries.
I wanted
Glad to do it.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, how are you doing right now? I feel very responsible, like, with checking in with everybody I podcast with. I'm especially curious how you're doing, because you're like a working comic, and I'm curious how you are during this time of quarantine.
It's stressful, and every comic situation is different. But yeah, it's not. I like the time because I'm with my family and nobody's sick, so that's good. Uh, I'm figuring out ways to make money, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, on the whole, it's motivated my own podcast. I've launched the Patreon. I never got around to doing that because I was doing the road and doing a bunch of other little things all at the same time. So it's
Mm-hmm.
helped me focus on like 3 or 4 projects, but also, the stage time has been knocked out. And then,
Yeah.
but I am working on a couple different things. So it's provided time for that. But I'm still, juggling the Corona family, homeschooling, everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I imagine you have. You were saying you have an 8-year-old, so having to transition. I guess having to transition them into virtual learning is kind of an adjustment.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But we're making do.
I'm glad to hear that, man. I I I not only love your comedy, you always make me laugh every time I see you, but you like I always include you in that sort of like DC comic scene because when I started in Baltimore, like in like 2007, there was not much of a scene in Baltimore compared to what I've heard there is now. So like we would go down to DC to like do open mics and stuff, me and all my friends, and you were always in that crew of like, oh, that guy is gonna be like, he's not only so funny, he's gonna be something. So I've always just really enjoyed your comedy, man. Did you start in DC?
Oh, thanks, Will. No, well, I mean, I was born in D.C. and then I grew up. I lived in D.C. till I was 10, and then
Mm-hmm.
we moved to a small town in Southern Virginia called Buena Vista, Virginia, which is like in Lexington. It's 4 hours south in the Appalachian Mountains,
Uh-huh.
and I lived there till I was like 16, and then we moved back to D.C. to the city. But then I didn't get into comedy till I was 26.
Oh,
So I moved out
really?
to California. So I guess the long story said, DC's in my soul and in my heart, and I know the city like the back of my hand. But when I started in the 90s, I started in 99, and I
Mm-hmm.
would say I graduated college in 95. Stand up was dead. It was almost like completely dead. It was there
Yeah.
wasn't much scene. There was the improv, and even that wasn't really selling tickets, and it was all kind of these leftovers from the 80s. I joke with another guy that San Francisco that writes like who is super hip that I thought was like the coolest guy ever. He wrote for Spin magazine. He's done all these like he wrote for the SF Weekly. He was like before hipster was a term. He was like the hipster comic of
Sure.
San Francisco. But I remember talking to him, and we were like, yeah, I remember when saying you did stand up comedy was as cool as saying you were a cop. Like people did not think it was cool. Like it got no press. It was kind of this weird, corny art form that was left in the bushes. So when I found it, I don't know, it was hidden and cool. And I was like, oh, this is out of all the art forms in terms of acting, in terms of, I mean, I enjoy music. I think music's a whole other thing, but
Mm-hmm.
showbiz wise, I had a lot of respect for stand up comedy. So I guess the long and the short is I didn't start in DC, but I started in San Francisco, and I kind of learned my way around because the DC scene was really patchy. There was only like 2 spots, but when I would come back, I saw Rory Scovel, all those guys were within their first year, and I was like 3 or 4 years in.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I got to know that scene, and they would always give me stage time. And I would stay with my mom, or I would be somewhere in DC with friends, and I would go out and get shows going.
Totally.
So yeah, I do have a background in DC comedy. I guess my long and the short is I started in San Francisco. I'm originally from DC, but yeah, I wouldn't say I started in like my open mic days were definitely in San Francisco.
Right. And you started in the 90s. Yeah, cuz I'm remembering a lot of what you're saying when I think of like the comedy boom of the 80s. By the time 95 rolls around, that's like long since gone and has and like all of the rooms have started to close by this point. And I don't know what your opinion on why stand up comedy just dropped off completely by the time the early 90s rolled around, but I'm led to think that there was just this massive influx. Like I guess any like hot genre of music or like the tech bubble, maybe you have this really core group of amazing comics who I think are all still working, And then you have all of these kind of like comics that work. Not saying they're necessarily bad, because if you're bad in stand up, I don't even think you get to the point where you can work steadily. Maybe I don't know. And they all became like corporate comics. So what do you think led to the death of stand up in the 90s?
I think it was a oversaturation, and there was only like it kind of got monopolized, and the art form didn't push much further than the skinny tie, you know, 2 drink minimum. And you in the '90s, you couldn't get 20 something kid to go do that, and I see a
Yeah.
little bit of that happening right now in some ways. That I think there is a big, there's a comedy boom happening. Uh, but I will say, yeah, I guess it was just the oversaturation, and nobody was really pushing the art form forward because it got a little bit safe, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been watching this documentary about Miles Davis. I mean, jazz. I was thinking about jazz. Jazz was so powerful and so deep and so generational.
Yeah.
And there was a place on 52nd Street. I was watching this documentary where it was just like wall to wall clubs, and the jazz guys would just bounce from club to club to club right across the street. But that's no longer there. There's only Birdland left. It's like
Yeah.
these things come in ebb and flows. But the cool thing was that I did, out of all the stand ups I respect the most, was the generation um, that was older than I was. And that was, like Dave Attell, Mitch
Mm-hmm.
Hedberg, Arj Barker, Sarah Silverman, um, like Dave Chappelle. Like you really had to really love stand up to stick with it in the mid '90s, because
Right.
it wasn't that cool. Like it really wasn't getting. It wasn't written up on Time Out magazine. Wasn't written in New York Times. This was just, and you would kill in front of like those guys. I remember Mitch Hedberg being on David Letterman, and that was like the biggest deal ever. Like it was like, oh my god, that guy's super made it. But now it's like everybody's on it. Not to sound like, a curmudgeon, but I do respect those guys back then, because but a lot of them are really they're not the easiest guys to be around. They're tough as nails, hanging out with Bill Burr or Tell. They're not the softest dudes.
Right.
But they're very funny. Like they're hardcore funny, and I think that came from having to come up in that bubble where when it really Jim Gaffigan, I think even Ted Alexandro's in there because those guys are a couple years ahead of me. I started in '99, actually July of '99, so I kind of got in right when I was trying to work. I still smelt the leftovers of the '80s and early '90s.
Sure. Like those like I when I think of like 80s comedy, I always think of that I think his name was Bob Nelson. He did he did that bit where he would dress up like a football player and he'd have balloons under his shirt and like
Yeah,
do them as shoulder pads. That's what I think of when I think of like 80s comedy. And then once the Iron Curtain fell and Yakov Smirnoff had to go to Branson to continue to do his act. Like that time. So I'm curious what your experience of the San Francisco scene of the late 90s was, because when I think of all those names you mentioned, I think those are all a lot of those are people that I think were not only like purists as far as like love of stand up, and then as far as pushing the boundary. I always think of the San Francisco comedy scene as a scene that really did that, because I've heard that you could like do like a weird character bit for 20 minutes and the crowd would not kill you.
totally. Yeah, if you're a weirdo, I think I was blessed enough to get out of the East Coast. I've been in New York since 2005,
Mm-hmm.
and I love it here in Brooklyn and all of it. But San Francisco, there is, everybody's kind of an artist, weirdo, pothead, musician, goofball. When I was there, like even if you had a straight job, everybody had some type of side gig. So it wasn't weird to do something creative. Whereas in the '90s on the East Coast, it was like, what do you mean that doesn't make money? Or I don't, it didn't compute. But
Right.
out there, it computed and made even more sense. yeah, and the more odd and the more weird and the more crazy, they would eat it up and love it. And I remember, yeah, the San Francisco Punchline, which was like the mainstream club, but even there, like people like killers from the road that would just like dominate the road would come there and get a tepid crowd response because, yeah, hack shit wasn't flying. Like they wouldn't,
Yeah.
they smelt it. If it smelled unoriginal or uninspired, it was like, you know, it was like it but the pace, the rhythm wasn't as hard as it is on the East Coast. Like New York is awesome because it's like you got to be funny very fast and right away. Whereas, yeah, there's in San Francisco, it definitely gave you room. It gave me room to breathe. And there was a lot of coffee shops. I lived in a hostel. I worked the midnight shift and I got a free room in this, like, literally, I squatted for a year,
Oh
but
wow.
it was in North Beach, and I got
Uh-huh.
a free room, and I worked the front desk on the graveyard shift 3 nights a week, and I got a free room, and I was like 3 blocks from the Punchline, 4 blocks from Cobb's Comedy Club, and then there was all this leftover like poetry coffee shops. So I every night of the week, my goal was either 5 to 7 sets a week, and that was before family, before wife. Like there was a good 3 years, especially in San Francisco, where it I was all in, like literally just like working midnight and then just writing in my notebooks and then going out, and then Sunday night at the Punchline was the big night, and you had to go in order to get on stage at the Punchline. And it's still this way, but it's kind of scary because comedy got so popular. But they were like, yeah, you can't go on stage unless you come here and hang out for at least 6 or 7 months. So it was a good, like, and there was still bottleneck from the 90s. So it was a good year and a half before I even got on a real comedy club stage. I was just doing all the other shows, and then when I got to the real stage, and they don't even tell you when to go up. It's I don't. Do you know this process in San Francisco?
I've heard about it sounds very similar to other kind of draconian like uh systems that I've gone through at different clubs, but I've heard at Cobb specifically, or like Cobb's or the Punchline, that you basically just have to kind of be there for a while, and then eventually you'll get a set or
Yeah,
like an
they want
audition.
you to be there and watch, so you're just not some jamoken off the street because it is like paid people coming in. It's not like an open mic. It's like $10 to get the door. People are seated. They got ushers and shit. So it's a little bit professional. I mean, if you want to go, but I was there during the Mission where hipsters first originated, and it was called the Marsh Theater, and you couldn't get more weird, whacked out, arty, and that's where you could go right up. Like the first week, just had to sign up. So if you wanted, that's what I did. But I did it for a year. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, they do just go, yeah, you're going up now. And if you go up right then and you bomb, you're out of the loop for a good 7 or 8 months. It takes a whole, it's
You
like
you got to
the
reset.
pressure's on to kill. And that's what it kind of helped me a little bit. As arty and weirdo as San Francisco was, the Punchline in those clubs kind of forced me to hone things in so I wasn't too far out there and I got the laughs.
Yeah, that makes me think that kind of makes me think of New York, like the kind of jokes that would like and references that would like go over super well in like a bar show in Brooklyn. You are going to get crickets at like stand up New York Friday first show or late show. Like
Yeah,
the ability to have the chops to kind of do the job, because I have always I still romanticize like comedy clubs as that's where you go and do the job. And um yeah, that makes total sense. Let me ask you this about San Francisco. Was Brainwash around when you were starting?
yeah. It's my second set was at the Brainwash, which was a punk rock laundromat that had
Yes.
bands and video games. But yeah, that was the first. Tony Sparks. That was my second mic, and it had a microphone. The first was the Luggage Store, which was on right downtown, like literally in an art space that was like an AA, like junky, kind of weird, grimy, right on Market Street. I know the street, and you go upstairs above this weird store, and they have this art space, and would have the most crazy, it was San Francisco and it was the 90s, so it'd be like this sexually explicit. It'd be like Jesus with a boner and a machine gun painted behind you,
Sure.
and you're going up there and you're performing in front of 12 people that are signed up in, I remember, folded chairs, like the folded metal chairs.
Yeah.
And then I did the brain.
Looks like a little bit of a
That
pause.
was like the real gig.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a whole, that was kind of like, the open mic system. Those were the first few clubs that everybody did.
Yeah, when I was in San Francisco a couple years ago, I made sure to hit up Brainwash because a few people told me about it. I couldn't get into like any of like the rooms or the full time rooms while I was there, but I made sure to do Brainwash. This environment sounds like the exact kind of perfect place because when I think of you, I your comedy to me is this absolutely beautiful trifecta of very solid, creative, observational jokes, the kind of slightly whacked out persona where it's not where you're never boring to watch, and then also this gleeful positivity that I find atypical of New York City, especially because when I think of New York, I think of like I've heard so many stories from like Harrison Greenbaum and other comics like at the Cellar who worked with like Patrice and all those guys, and just the amount of like bullying, somewhat borderline sounding bullying that goes on. I'm amazed that you've maintained your gleeful positivity in New York City, which I always considered much tougher.
Yeah, I mean, I got married and had a kid, and I always had, I mean, I got passed at the Cellar and I worked there, but I'm not one of those Cellar guys. But I did stand up New York with Patrice, on New Year's. We co-headlined, like in 2007, we did something. But yet, it's just that Northeast, and at the end of the day, I'm, a silly goofball pothead from DC and Virginia. And so there wasn't my
Right.
sense of humor, my vibe has never been like, hey, fuck you, you got a little dick, and this guy's got a weird haircut. It's just never, that's never even, I never thought of that as super funny. But when I got into stand up, roast stuff does kill, it does get a reaction. But it's not what I'm best at, and I'm still juggling with that to this day. But I think just even in the past couple of years, I've just been more accepting of, my place in the comedy world. That I am a goofball, positive. Uh, that's what I wanted to be, and that's what I've become. I guess, yeah, you got to put blinders on, and I do know just with negativity, it's like I understand cynicism and I understand nihilism. I mean, I grew up in the early '90s. Uh, but it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for my funny, and it doesn't work for my overall vibe. And even when I saw Bill Hicks, I thought Bill Hicks was amazing, and I still think spiritually, like not talking spiritually, but he was the only person really talking about consciousness and talking about expanding consciousness on a very real level. And that, even as an artist, there's nobody that's ever been up there. You could sing it in a song maybe, but nobody ever just got down to brass tacks. But the only thing is, it was in a very negative, like he would just go so hard. And when you go so hard into the negative, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of power, but it just implodes on itself. And I've even noticed that from a young age. I was just like, that's not the vibe. I wanted somebody like Bill Hicks, but with a complete fucking rainbow. Like, go hard the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's
And so that's kind of the thing that's what I've always tried to pull is like, don't be a pussy about it. But at the same time, life is a gift. I've always believed that. And I think every moment is a gift. And I know it could end any second. I thought everybody was playing on that page, you know?
mm-hmm.
But society has taught people otherwise. or they're like, yeah, we're all gonna die. Fuck it, let's burn it to the ground. Which is one way of thinking of it, but I'd rather build a tree house and play guitar and
Right, right.
or something like that. I'd rather create a happy world. But everybody's got their own world to create. But yeah, thanks for noticing. Yeah, that's something I've always tried to push positivity or just at least have a goofball vibe. And I think that comes from DC.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, not only just DC and this kind of proximity to like the way the free quote free world is run, but then you have this other side of your upbringing that's chilling out in the mountains amidst the serenity of nature. I don't know that deep part of Virginia. I've spent a lot of time in the DMV, but when I get down to like where I'm from in Maryland, and it's like very remote, there's just something kind of tranquil about just like listening to like the crickets, and then you're just kind of like, and you're looking at the sky and the stillness of like a lake or a creek. It's just quite spectacular. Bill Hicks with Rainbows that should be in your press kit, I think, because that's a beautiful way.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful.
But I don't think I ever would touch. I think he definitely was like in terms of guitarist level, like a Hendrix. But yeah, I think I wanted to take that anger and that passion, but go the opposite direction and see if I could break through something.
Totally. And did you see him in San Francisco or New York?
Yeah, I guess I never saw him live. I started in '99, so he died, I think, in '96 or '97.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the dudes, like when I started, I didn't know about Bill Hicks, when I started comedy. I knew about Sam Kinison. I knew about Lenny Bruce. I knew George Carlin. I was a huge Richard Pryor fan.
Yeah. Live on the Sunset Strip.
His album when I was young. One time I got my worst beating as my dad, because I come from the '80s. My dad used to whip me with a belt. I had the Richard Pryor album he caught me listening to like in the 4th grade and whipped my ass. It was our neighbors, but it was literally like the filth. And I must have been like in the 4th grade, and Richard Pryor's talking about snorting coke with his dick. It's literally like what and I've always been I like dirty goofball shit, and Pryor was dirty and goofball. And I remember, and then Eddie Murphy, Delirious, that hit at the right time, and we just got HBO, and I had a babysitter when my parents were out, let me watch that, and I remember that being like the happiest. I couldn't stop laughing. And as un-PC as all that stuff was, saying the F word but at the same time there was a silly goofballness to it. It was like Mr. T having anal sex. It's like to a 7th grader or a 6th grader, that's the funniest thing you've ever heard in your life. I'm sure like the next generation it was Sandler. I think maybe you were a little bit younger. That Sandler musical album was for them. But I remember Delirious just blew me away. And even the Robin Williams, the classic HBO, I did get to see that 80s boom, and I remember seeing the HBO Young special with Rodney Dangerfield and seeing Jim Carrey there on the first time, and Jim Carrey was doing these awesome impressions of you ever see his impressions of like Sammy Davis Jr. and stuff?
Yeah, I have. Those are dead on. So good.
They're dead on, but they're also abstract and silly and kind of trippy. They're not like, they were a little bit like, they were Jim Carrey-fied. And I always was like, whoa, I never thought I could do something like that. But one of the first comedians was in Roanoke, Virginia. I wanted to go see was Rich Hall. And Rich Hall wrote these books about sniglets. And I saw him when I was like 14.
Oh, that name sounds so familiar. Rich Hall.
He's huge in London. Yeah, you should check him out as a musician. He was on SNL for like 5 years. He wrote for this show called Not Necessarily News. Now this is all like mid 80s, maybe even early 80s. But I had a lot of older cousins and an older brother, so I was hip to a lot of this shit. That's even the generation behind me. Rich Hall does like Lee Hall Crenshaw, like he does this countrified hillbilly banjo character, and he kills it in London for like the last 10 years.
Oh, wild. That's
Yeah, you
really
should look
interesting.
him up. You would probably, as a musician, you would totally trip out on that.
Oh, cool. I will absolutely check that out. Thanks, man. Okay, so you're coming up in San Francisco. How long do you stay in San Francisco? What happens after that city?
Yeah, it was 3 years, and I worked at the hostel, and then I got a job. I had to move. I moved like three different places, and eventually I was out by the beach. That was wild. And I lived in the living room, and I had roommates everywhere, and I lived on a mattress that was from the street.
Mm-hmm.
And but I got an assistant teaching job, Craigslist. I was assistant teacher at this private school. Like
Uh-huh.
when I cleaned myself up, and I did have a real job after school, and I was a salesperson, and I made good money. But when I went into comedy at 25, I just was like, I'm going all in.
Yeah.
So I got an assistant teaching job, but I got on the very first Last Comic Standing. That was the biggest thing that ever happened to the scene.
Yeah.
It was 2003, and it hadn't even been a show, and they had an open audition, and by then I was opening at the Punchline, and I was working with Hedberg, and in those weeks at comedy clubs, you would start at Tuesday, and then go to Sunday, so you would do like 12 sets a night, and you would
Wow.
be opening, and you had to be funny really fast. You weren't there long. You're just up there for like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But there was enough competition in San Francisco, and a lot of super creative weirdos that wanted to do stand up. So, but you learned how to be funny really fast. I don't know, it was perfect timing. But I got on the very first Last Comic Standing. I was top 10. I was in the house. I shared a bunk bed with Dat Fan on NBC television. The ratings were, I was 28 years old. I'd only been in stand up for 3 years.
Wow, that's so
So all that
crazy.
sacrifice and all that living in a hostel and all that stuff kind of culminated into this. And at the time, I was very confident. I would say I was more confident. I am confident now, and I know who I am a lot more. But I was delusional because I was just so obsessed with the stuff. I was like, I don't give a. I was really at like, I really think I'm one of the funniest guys out here, and I believed it. 100% believed it, even though I wasn't. I was 3 years in, but I was opening, and I was paying the dues. I was doing the 10,000 hours, and I knew my act was a little bit more out there than everybody else's because of San Francisco.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember that you were on the very first season of Last Comic Standing because I remember. I guess I don't know remember what stage of the process it was. It might have been like that initial audition that they used to do. That's televised, and I remember Joe Rogan saying that he loved your shark joke.
Yes, that was a great moment. I mean, that was like Monique and Buddy Hackett, and I remember watching Buddy Hackett on like HBO specials. And Joe Rogan, I loved news radio. Like I thought news radio, and I was a huge Phil Hartman fan. Still am. I still think he's like one of the coolest individuals that walked the earth. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was even a huge Joe Rogan fan. And that was, yeah, I was just really, that was just a hot year that survived me, that got me up and running. But it was almost so much, it was so overwhelming because uh, they've never had, it's weird to explain to even the guys that were in the year after that, or the guys that were year in the third, like there had never been that before. There was no stand up on primetime television. Like I said, it was coming out of the 90s. So it was like if you got a late night on Craig Kilborn, that was like a huge deal. Like, but then to
Yeah.
be on prime time kind of, and I got a lot of hate from a lot of the older comics. It was weird to maneuver, but it was also a really cool time. And I met Ralphie May, and I toured with Jay Moore after that for like a year and a half. And then I had Barry Katz was my manager. There was like that summer, there was like a good 2 months in Hollywood. Like I was like one of the hottest kids in comedy. I would say like, not, I mean, coming up like, oh shit, this guy's on NBC television. It's not like Comedy Central. This is like network television. And the ratings were like Friends ratings. Cause that was the year that there was like, Survivor and all that. So those reality shows would get these crazy ratings.
Yeah, because
And
it was kind of
so,
like a new yeah, because reality TV at the time before that, it was kind of like the Real World and Row Rules and stuff on MTV, but like it was still relatively a new idea. And then yeah, to think that like I'm trying to remember who else, because wasn't like yes, I Dat Fan. I remember Dat Fan from that season, and then Ralphie May, and then I'm trying to think if this is like like with around the time like Alonzo Bone. I think Burt Kreischer might have been on an early season of Last Comic Standing. Also,
Yeah, he was on like the second or third. I toured with Burt Kreischer for like a year with Jay Moore. I opened for those guys.
oh, that would have been such a fun show to go to. I sometimes forget doing comedy for so long that I like to go and see it, if that makes any sense. That would have been
You fall in and out of it because you got your nose to the grindstone.
yeah, but that would man that would have been like seeing like trying to think of a music example. That would be like seeing like like huge pop stars that like like on the club level. Like I remember when Katy Perry was on Warp Tour, and I walked by when she was performing. I was like, oh, she's cool. And then she sells out the Madison Square Garden. Weird how the world works sometimes. So
I know. I remember not going to the Bill. It was my freshman year in college, and Columbus was like an hour away from my little college. But I remember even listening to the radio, and the lineup was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nirvana, and the Smashing Pumpkins. And at a venue that was like 800 to 1,000, like the local like little rock club.
sure.
And I didn't go, but I remember being like, God damn it, why didn't I go to that show?
I know the tickets for that show would be like $800 if
You're never
that tour
gonna
around.
see that again. Yeah.
Yeah, you would that. Wow, what a crazy time. So Last Comic Standing, you get all this momentum. You're with Barry Katz, who's I think considered a like one of the most high profile comedy managers, maybe at least from my perspective. And you get and you do all these tours. And are you in LA at the time?
Yeah, I moved from San Francisco. I was living with a blind art teacher that had a back room, and I
Mm-hmm.
would help him out with just like life on general for like over a year. He's still my good friend, but he rented me like a back room for like $300, but it was out by Cal Palace. That's
Mm-hmm.
literally like almost Daly City. Like it took you like it took you forever. So I
Yeah.
bounced all over San Francisco. I started in North Beach. I went out to the Richmond. I went out to Sunset, and then finally I was out by Cal Palace. So, but then Last Comic hit, and I got some money, but not a ton. Like they didn't pay us like that much money on that thing. And out of everybody, I only had like 3 years of experience. And it was like the very first year, so clubs weren't headlining me, and that was a big thing with Barry Katz and I going back and forth. Like I was like, you guys got to get me. I wanted real money,
Sure.
and it was kind of this weird, frustrating time, but also a blessing because Barry owned the Boston Comedy Club.
Yes.
So I was like, Barry, I just got on TV. We got to get me on the road. And the clubs were like, I don't know. And as I know now, like they were right. I didn't have the time.
Sure.
But Barry was like, I can get you to work at the Boston every night, every weekend. So I literally came to New York and stayed on Steve Burns' couch and then stayed with a friend. But Barry would give me sets, and I would have 3 sets a night paid at the Boston Comedy Club. I had to follow Patrice, I have Burr, all these guys. Like I was doing sets with.
That'll
Uh,
get you funny. That'll get you funnier faster because just out of necessity.
Yeah, but that room was death, man. And it was rough. It was a rough room, but then you could kill. It was like either live, it was a weird one, but it was like the Village, but it also had college, and it was also kind of grimy, and it was kind of urban, but also kind of like New York stand-up-y. It was just a weird mixture. But in a lot of times there was only like 7 people in the audience, and they were completely random. But sometimes it was like packed, and it would be the night of your life. But I did bomb there one time, bombing Patrice in front of like, I don't know, like 25 people.
Uh huh.
And Spike Lee was one of the people there. So I bombed in front of Spike Lee.
Oh wow.
But it was following Patrice. What are you fucking going to do, man?
Yeah, it's
I
kind
was
of
like 3 years in. I was like 4 years in. But no, it was kind of a good and a blessing like everything, like it's all happened, and I did get to capitalize on it a little bit because the punchline even wouldn't headline me. Everybody was holding off. I don't know. It was almost too much. I don't know. It was, and maybe it was my attitude. I'm not sure, but it wasn't playing out. But I did somehow book the Great American Music Hall, and it was like literally like the month after Last Comic Standing, which is a big rock venue in San Francisco, like a classic rock venue.
Yeah.
And I sold it out, and I did it with W. Kamau Bell.
Oh, that's awesome. I
Kamau
love
Bell
I
and
love
I
that guy.
started out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Alan Madrigal and W. Kamau Bell, like it. San Francisco, yeah, it was diverse, but also kind of, I know people, it was definitely just, it was liberal, but it was also hardworking and creative and cool.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm thinking at maybe this point, if you're 3 years in, yeah, maybe you couldn't like do a full 45 at that point, but there was always those like co-headlining shows that comics do when they're like working on the hour, but maybe they got 20 or 25. So like pairing up with like guys like that must have been that could have been a fun. That was probably a fun time, I imagine.
That was a blast. Yeah, I still look back and I watched the tape. I was like, yeah, this kid's only got like 5 minutes when
Uh
I
huh.
watch it. But at the time, I was like, why? I'm selling out this rock theater. What are these guys doing?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. I remember like
Yeah, the
listening.
only thing about that last comic standing, like that reality buzz, is just, it goes fast, it goes up really fast, it goes down very fast. And so from then, I just had to figure it out from there. But I was good enough with the punchline that Jeff Wills, he's like the head of Clear Channel or a head of Live Nation comedy now, but he booked the punchline and he did this first tour that was doing theaters, like one of his first like big theater comedy. Well, not he done some bigger stuff than this, but it was with Mitch Hedberg and Stephen Lynch. So I got to go on a theater tour. I opened theaters for Mitch Hedberg and Stephen Lynch.
I've
Right, kind of right when I started, kind of the buzz started going down. I got picked up to open on this theater tour, and that taught me a lot. Like I toured with Jay and Bert, and their style is super aggro, kind of almost jock type
Yeah,
style,
kind of
which
high energy.
high energy, and I have a little bit of that. But Hedberg and Arge, and I do like surreal stuff, and that was like Mitch Hedberg's crowd was like the best crowd ever.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. I
yeah,
imagine his crowd's
those
super
shows were
chill.
amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. So I guess I didn't know this that you came to New York on for stage time after Last Comic Standing on the advice of Barry Katz. I did not know this about your path through the comedy world. That's fascinating.
Well, no, Barry and I, we kind of split. There was Jay and I wasn't getting along. There was some, you could talk to Bert about that whole thing, but as a kid from DC, I wasn't going to take that shit. So I mean, he's a good guy, but he was just like it was Hollywood, hardcore Hollywood. These guys were making moves. They were selling out improvs and stuff like that, and I was
Hmm.
opening for them. And yeah, I there was a point where Barry and I just couldn't work together anymore, and that's when I moved to New York. But Barry was good to me and got me work and got me work. A lot of it was just I was growing too fast or growing too slow. All of this stuff, things happen and you learn from them. I learned so much from all those years. They were tricky and I had a lot of success, but a lot of stuff with meditation, like even success can be dangerous. You
Sure.
have to, and then if bad things happen, sometimes bad things happen and they lead to good things.
Is there any advice I could ask you as someone who's been there before? Because my career is still very much on that slow, very like slow upward trickle. I'm just now at the point where I've decided that doing this podcast is part of how I'm gonna be take control over my own destiny. Is there any advice you can give to someone like me who to kind of navigate some of these pitfalls?
Yeah, I would say don't believe the hype. I would say you're doing everything right. I saw your podcast, I listened to it. You're doing everything that you're interested in. And I would say and I do know a lot of comics that got a lot of success early on and they fizzled out and even quit or gone away because they couldn't emotionally they couldn't deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, a gradual, good, healthy climb is actually going to give you more of a solid footing. And and that's just what you want. You want to just know who you are and have solid footing. And then you can just take the data in any situation you're in. You're like, oh, I could do this, or I can work towards this, or this scene, I'm kind of feeling these vibes. I know not to go there. Maybe I should go over this way.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I appreciate your input because, and I'm sure you've had younger comics ask you these kinds of questions before, because when you're new, and especially in New York, like the idea of like, oh, how do I get into this room? How do I impress this person? All of it is so alien. So to have that kind of grounding that you're saying I have, which I appreciate. I'm not fishing for compliments. I swear.
No, you
Uh,
do. You're taking the steps, the proper steps.
well, that's good to hear. Because sometimes the march forward is so uncertain, and it's kind of hard to know what's working. Um, but I've always kind of, yeah, I started kind of thinking, well, what am I interested in, and just do that, because sending out like messages to people who book shows, and getting told like maybe next year or something like that can wear on your self esteem after a little while. But
100%. Yeah, it's a tough gig. There's no the thing I always was like the reason I didn't get into it early because I loved comedy so much and I knew it was going to be hard. But then I started doing it and I fell in love with it and it ended up being 10 times harder than I ever thought it was going to be. But I
right,
still love it. And it does get easier and if you just go forward and not think, I think meditation has helped me immensely
oh yeah,
and kind of going towards the love and going towards the fun and not taking yourself too serious, but taking yourself serious enough that when it's time to focus, be able to focus. A lot of it's just focus on the task at hand. And that's just being funny. And that's in everybody, but it just takes a minute to figure it out. Just like playing guitar.
yeah, absolutely. Do you play guitar?
I do, and I'm not that good at it. I took violin as a young age, and I could play some Bo Diddley, and I could play a little Pink Floyd. I'm working on it, and I shouldn't say that's negative self-talk, so I shouldn't say that. But I do know that if I do work on it, things start to open up. Like I see how my fingers move, and eventually I'm like, I never thought I could do that, or where the fuck did that come from? You know? And it's the same
Uh-huh.
thing with stand up. You just keep on writing and you don't think you're still strumming and banging on this thing, and then all of a sudden you take a couple steps and these doors open. You're like, oh, what's this all about? Okay, I could do this. This is great. I never thought I'd be here.
I know what you mean. I my fiance got me Easy Drummer 2 for my birthday last week, and I've been having such a great time just putting together drum parts for songs and playing along to it. And when I first started guitar, I could barely do scales, or I had no idea what chords were. I would just kind of like strum it open and look for chimey parts. So
Yeah.
to be able to listen to something I made and it's very exciting when those things happen. So I understand exactly what you're saying, and especially like if you're a stand up, to look back on like your jokes year one compared to your jokes now, that's like an excellent way of charting growth. I wanted to ask you, because you said you were doing the road a lot before this happened. I'm curious how, with if you're like headlining or featuring somewhere in like in the Midwest or someplace that maybe not, it would be considered friendly to kind of like an out there kind of style like yours. How do you adjust for the crowd in those situations?
You know, I I was lucky. Like now, it's gotten so. I mean, it's good and bad. With podcasts, and now you're really up to building your own audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of that club scene is there, and you could tap into it, but it's not the end all to be all. But I got to. But if you jump on or somebody big I got to open for Tracy Morgan for the last year and a half. So
Oh,
that's what's
cool.
kind of kept me doing a lot of the more my mainstream stuff. But something, I guess you got to go back. Being yourself is always funny.
Yeah.
As out there as you can be is great, but at the same time, you still gotta be yourself, and people will relate to that. And having a kid, I have a bunch of material that's about my kid or my wife giving birth, and yeah, I know if it's just as mainstream as an audience as it gets, I can always lean into that, and then I can win them over with some of that stuff, and then go into some of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but kind of basic stuff, sex and farts. There's a reason why those things work, is because on a human level it goes beyond class or race or culture. Bodily
Right.
funk. I would say stick to the simple. Keep it simple, stupid is kind of the motto sometimes
Totally.
in situations.
That makes sense. Like the comparatively, like if I was going to make a music analogy, and specifically jazz, because I thought it was really interesting you brought up jazz. Um, think of like bebop, very rhythmically complex, atonal. Musicians know that that's stellar, but sometimes if you just listen to like Louis Armstrong go like "Hey Dolly," or even just that simple vamp on "So What" on "Kind of Blue," that da da ba da 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 da. You could probably figure that out in a couple of hours, but there's just something so satisfying about that.
Yeah, the most I've been listening to this philosopher Lao Tzu. It's like the way, but a couple of things he was saying is like the most artistic stuff is like the most crude things, and
Yeah,
then the most, if somebody's talking very flowery and smart, or they're usually not saying much.
yeah,
So keeping things as, there's a reason the Ramones work. There's a reason,
it,
AC/DC works,
yep,
but there is time not to be basic. I guess I'm always trying to balance all of this stuff. But one of the things is staying in the center and not leaning towards either the right or the left. And, just being right in the center so you can, go off and drift and maybe do something a little bit more experimental just to keep it a little bit exciting. But at the same time, be able to bring it back in and keep this thing moving forward with, just a little 1-2 punch, easy jokes right off the bat.
totally. I'm learning so much from your sage wisdom, Rob. Um,
I don't know about that, but thank you, man. As I can, anything you want to know, I can pass it on.
well,
Tracy Morgan had said that to me. Like knowledge, it doesn't mean anything to know anything if you don't pass it on.
yeah, absolutely. Uh,
I mean, I'm shy, and I've learned. I'm not saying I know everything, but I have been doing stand up for 20 years now.
that's awesome, and I think at a certain point, just continuing to perform is so much of a victory. Granted, it's there's an asterisk by all of our names right now when it comes to comedian, but yeah, just continuing to last, because I I've always had this biggest fear as a performer of like not like 80s hair metal. The bands like there were bands like Poison and Warrant that got really big. But then there was bands, well maybe Warrant's the example, that had like the hot year and then it wasn't sustainable and then they had to go get like a job at Blockbuster. That was always a fear of mine when I was younger. Um, so I'm picking up so long way of saying continuing to do the thing, I think, is as much a victory as anything.
Yeah, and it's not given, and we're all in the same boat. I will say, like, yeah, a lot of it's in the moment. So if you show up at the gig and you do it, or you try to book the gig, whether it's big, small, or medium, or whatever it is, just doing it is 98% of the battle. The rest is finesse or whatever artistic thing you want to put into it. But just moving forward, and I think that with we have these such powerful brains, but they overthink everything. You really just have to move forward through it all.
Totally. And it sounds like meditation is a big part of that for you.
I would say, yeah, just being in New York and being so stressed out with family and then career and everything, like, I don't know, it came, I had to do it. Like it, but then when I do it, it feels so great. It's literally just like learning to turn the thing about stand up is like you get unlike music where you're kind of using your brain, but you're more using your feel and your heart. I specifically think joke writing, you're really in your head. You're really going at it. Pop, pop, you're looking at everything from every direction and
Yeah.
trying to come up with an original thing, which is good. But if you can't turn it off over the years, it will eat you up, and it could be a tricky battle mentally. So meditation has been, just a great thing. And it's the cheapest thing you could do. There's nothing more free than that, all you got to
Mm-hmm.
do is sit there and try not to do anything and try not to think anything. It sounds easy or it sounds impossible, but you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I've never like full on sat and meditate, but I do find a lot of value in just taking a second, not doing anything, and just kind of going, because I feel like New York, especially, is such the grind is so much a part of the identity of New York. Like this is where you go to work constantly, and my fiance like lives and breathes her job. It's a very kind of like full, like all hours of the day kind of thing, and when you're really in it, uh, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, there is real value just taking a pause. I'd love to ask you how long have you been doing the podcast? Well, I would love to know more about that.
It's well, I've been doing it like a year and a half, but I used to have a podcast called on Brooklyn Radio. It was before internet. It was even before, it was like a little bit when Mark Maron was on Air America. There was this station in Brooklyn that had all DJs, but my roommate was a DJ,
Uh huh.
and but the DJs the Rub were on it, which is a big Brooklyn DJ troupe. Cosmo Baker was one of them. But then I had my little internet radio. They gave me a show. It was me and a comic named Rondell Hartley, who's from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And Rondell opens for Tony Woods. And we had a DJ and two turntables, and we would listen to comedy albums, and we would listen to old hip hop, a lot of 80s boom bap hip hop, 12 inches, like the shit that I really love.
Yeah, yeah.
And we would smoke bongs and drink coffee. And it was a blast, but it was at another person's space. We had another person engineering it. We had a DJ. It was just a lot of these projects is like, time, money, people, all of these things. If you don't have a dollar sign attached to it, it's hard to keep it going. And the thing about podcasts, much like stand-up, you got to just keep on going. So
Yeah.
yeah, long story short, I got a lav mic for a short film series that I did with Mookie Thompson called PMA, Positive Mental Attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But we got these lav mics that go into your phone, and there's a Shure app. And we were using that as secondary sound from the boom mic. And they
Mm-hmm.
worked great. You got the file and everything. But we only shot like 4 of them, and I bought this thing. I was like, well, I got to do a podcast now.
Right,
So I
right.
started doing it off my phone. And I really loved Bill Burr's approach to just like, after doing so many, like I also had a talk show called Keep It Surreal, and I would have guests, but I had camera people and lighting, which is great. But if you don't have any money, it's hard to keep that stuff going. But with a
Sure.
podcast, it's really you can do it off your phone. So I've been doing it off my phone for like a year, but I also knew GarageBand, so I would airdrop it and then I would cut it up in GarageBand. And I like making beats, but I'm not great at it. But I put my own beats on there,
Uh-huh.
and so I've been doing it a year and a half. It's called the Cannabis Coffee Hour, and I drink coffee, and sometimes I smoke pot, sometimes I eat an edible, sometimes I don't. But I'm just starting to ramp up the guests, and I do know a lot of people. So I'm just starting to ask. people. And with Zoom, that kind of opened everything up. But I just had Henry Zabrowski on the newest episode from last podcast on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had him on the last one. And I used to do shows with Murder Fist, their sketch group, all the time. So we're old friends. So yeah, that's the podcast right now. I'm up to 73 episodes and it's weekly.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's great. Cannabis Coffee Hour. That sounds super cool.
Yeah, I would like to make it kind of like yeah, I would like it. Sometimes I try different coffees, I try different beans, I try different cannabis, but I would kind of like driver's dive-ins and dives to like coffee shops or cool spaces.
Yeah.
And then as cannabis legalizes, hopefully it'll open up. But it's kind of my two. You kind of gravitate towards the stuff you love.
Oh yeah, 100%. When I realized it took me a while to start doing a podcast because I just thought I would be ripping off Mark Maron, and then by doing a comic interview podcast or being a comedian and doing interviews, and then I realized like I'll grab what makes me who I am. Joe Rogan's thing is he's really into transcendental thought and MMA and current event stuff. What makes Mark Maron his thing? He likes guitar and he interviews musicians and comedians. I'll interview comedians and musicians and people I'm interested in. So that having that realization was really opening. Like you were saying, you kind of gravitate to what you like. And then
if you're doing that, then it's kind of true, and it kind of comes through.
Yeah, and then it's not work. It's just, to me that's living the dream. And you have 2 albums out right now?
I have one out and I'm going to reissue another, but I did one in 2009 called Keep on the Grass, and I think it's on Pandora, but it's not, and I think it gets spun on Sirius, but I may have to, I'm trying to like, there's some bits on there that are just not that great. I was like 5 or 6 years in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but there's also, I have a song called Coffee and Weed that's on there. That is a really good song that I'm proud of and that I like, but it's not on Spotify. So my next project is kind of taking that old album and then taking some of these older songs that I have laying around and making a mixtape. But right now it's called Pure Uncut Joy. I released in 2018 with 800-Pound Gorilla, and we taped it at Pete's Candy Store and in Brooklyn, and that's the newest one that's out. It's like 2 years old.
Awesome. Pete's Candy Store is the first place I ever did comedy in New York City, like before I lived here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got a lot of love for that spot. That's great, man.
Me too. Yeah, I just like the vibe in there. I like the wooden vibe, and I just wanted a small, weirdo Brooklyn room, and I knew the acoustics were going to be amazing, and I was like, oh, I should do an album in here.
Totally. I've slowly over the past couple of years been gathering like mics and adapters because I have this theory in my head that I could record my album myself when we're allowed to do shows again. So yeah, Pete's Candy Store would be a perfect spot. I just thought of that now while we were talking. So you got the podcast, and then I like to close on this sometimes. What is something that you want to create that you haven't done yet?
I would say I would love to be in a major film or create a movie. That would be great. I would like to do that, and I'd say a movie would be it, or a TV show.
Oh, awesome! I think that's totally, man. I'm sure that there's like some cool mumblecore like New York City independent film idea that's out there that you would just knock out of the park, man. I could see that.
I mean, I got to be on The Last OG, and I got to be on a real set, and I got to a whole role. And I have, I'm not a theater kid. I never was I was a stand-up. I was a pot-smoking goofball, C student stand-up, and that's just who I was, and that's who I am. But I can act, and it doesn't intimidate me anymore. And I enjoyed doing it, and I was on set, stuff like that. But just the creative process, working with people, if I get to stay alive long enough that I can get to a point where I'm doing stuff like that, that would be amazing. I'm releasing. I want to do some more hip hop songs or some more music is great, and I want to gravitate and make music too.
Oh, that's so cool, man. If you would be interested, and I'd love to send you a couple of the songs that I've been working on for my band. That I've
Yeah, I would love to hear it, man.
Yeah, because I wrote a song. We have this song that's sort of like a Weezer meets '50s pop song that I put together in at my desk here. That I'm really excited about. I put it on my Patreon, but I haven't spread it super widely yet. So I'd love to get your feedback on it.
Yeah, I would love that. I love some good old, guitar chord, garage rocky type. Yeah, I love that, but poppy and fun. Yeah, I did listen. You have a music background and you played in bands, and then you had a few people on your podcast that played in, with major music groups, right? You have a background in music.
Yes, I do. I was in I because that's what I was going to be. I was going to be a musician before I got burned out on like working with people. Like I got disappointed by a few collaborations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had a lot of music people on. I've had by the time this releases, I'll have released my episode with Jarrett, the lead singer of Bowling for Soup, and I've had I have interviewed one of the singers in the band Alistair. Like, yeah, I've been fortunate enough to interview some very cool music people.
And you came from Baltimore. Has a wild music. Baltimore has always had a music scene going on. So is DC. Is that where you're from?
I originally grew up in Calvert County, which is about an hour south of DC, like near the Chesapeake Bay. But I went to college in Baltimore.
Down there,
What's that?
like Fredericksburg.
Further.
You're saying Maryland. Okay, okay.
Yeah, so if you get on Pennsylvania Avenue and go south, it eventually turns into Route 2 and 4, and
Yes.
that's where I'm from.
Oh
Where
wow.
Yeah, like even south of Annapolis, like I'm way down there. You might know St. Mary's County.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, so you drive through Calvert County to get to St. Mary's. That's where I'm from originally.
Nice.
And
Beautiful.
yeah, and Baltimore specifically, when I was in college, there was a venue in Baltimore County in Towson, which is like the suburbs compared to Baltimore City. There was a place called the Recker Theater, and I saw so many great shows there. I remember seeing the band SR-71 headline. They had that song Right Now. That was their biggest hit. And
Yeah.
and one of the opening bands was a pop punk band called All Time Low, who are massive now. They're super, super popular. I think they just put out their like sixth or seventh album.
Wow.
And it's just, I saw so many cool bands come through there. I saw Anti-Flag a ton of times, Motion City Soundtrack, like all of the pop punk and alternative bands you think of from like the 2000s, early 2000s. I probably saw them.
They came through that venue specifically. Like there's nice, cool theater that's like an hour outside of Baltimore. Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Oh yeah, it was such a wild time, man. I would love to, if you ever wanted to like do this show again or have me on your show and just talk music, I would be all about that, dude.
Oh, I'll have you on, man. I'm starting to leaning into music a lot more. Yeah, I listen to everything. So I just had this girl on that used to work at High Times that I know, but she's like this. She heads like the fish. She's like the number one Fish fan, and I saw the Grateful Dead at RFK with Jerry Garcia. I saw Fish. I saw Widespread Panic. I saw Dave Matthews at a fucking house party, which I know all this stuff is cheesy, but I also saw Chuck Brown. I also saw Great Go-Go. My friend used to hang out with Ian MacKaye in DC. Like I knew that whole punk scene as well. So yeah, I listened to just about everything. But I know Motion City Soundtrack. I liked those guys. They had a couple good songs that I enjoyed.
Yeah, they have. I love. They're like one of my top 5 of all time. I really enjoyed their stuff. And SR-71, even though like they only had, I guess, one really massive hit, they're out. They have 3 albums, and I think all of their songs just really slay. I dig that stuff.
From Baltimore, right?
Yeah, they are from Baltimore.
because I would do 98 Rock a lot. Because the one club that would book me right after Last Comic Standing, so there was like a couple B rooms that would headline me, and one of them was the Baltimore Comedy Factory. But you had to do 3 shows on Friday, 3 shows on Saturday, and it was all you could drink. And
Yep.
it was up above Burke's,
Uh-huh.
which is Burke. It was like this old ass restaurant, but it was as grimy a Baltimore comedy as it gets. But I would always do 98 Rock, and they liked me, and I would sell tickets there. And so I would headline there twice a year. So I got to know I got to know 98 Rock. I knew Justin Slagle when he was just an intern. But I remember SR, is it 71? I remember them always being around and always being brought up as good guys, and everybody loved them.
Yeah, SR 71. They were great. I'm hoping that I can get a hold of the lead singer at some point. That would be incredible because I really enjoy that band and they meant a lot to me. Yeah, 98 Rock, dude. I remember Justin Schlegel's going to do the show soon because that guy I can't breathe when I watch that dude stand up because he just makes me laugh so hard. And the Baltimore Comedy Factory, I remember when I was maybe like my first year into stand up and I got guest spots at the Comedy Factory because a friend told Mickey Coachella that I was funny, and I would go up and I maybe did the 5 minutes of material, like keep it simple, that I knew would kill in that environment. And it was a rush, but I also felt like I just won a gladiator competition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to do an hour up there.
I know because yeah, exactly. Doing an hour in that cramped upstairs room and then those $20 all you can drink tickets that I saw those all through Baltimore City. I saw those tickets all through Baltimore County. So you would get people that just want to go, people that think, oh, 2 drink minimum at a comedy club.
It wasn't high end, but they were also, Baltimore's kind of cool in its own way. And I would still have a blast there. I don't know. I look back on it fondly. And Burke's had like legitimate crab cakes. Like it had the real deal, like good seafood, old school Baltimore like food. So I would be like, oh, this is fucking awesome. If you've been out in California and New York for the last 10 years, it'd blow me away.
Yeah, you could get some like real deal crab cakes there. I remember next time I get down to Baltimore, because I never knew this or partook in this when I lived there. Pit beef is apparently like a famous Baltimore food. And there's some place in like a super sketchy neighborhood that apparently has like the best pit beef. And next time I drive down, I need to hit it up.
Yeah, you definitely do. I love Baltimore. I love finding those places.
Me as well, dude. If you play Baltimore again, I know like the good. If you need like a local opener, I know the funniest people.
Okay, I will. Yeah, the next time hopefully I'll ramp it up and get down there after this all cools out.
Yeah, I think, and I hope it does as well. Let me turn my camera on. I can give you a proper farewell, Rob. Just do that.
Okay.
So I really appreciate this, man. Is there anything else we can plug before we get out?
That's it, man. Just the Cannabis Coffee Hour, and just started the Patreon. So please just go to that. And I just got Henry Zabrowski up on the video, and you can watch the video from the Patreon, or you can just listen to it on Spotify.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, folks, that is our show for this week. That is Rob Cantrell. You can get his album, Pure Uncut Joy, wherever you get your comedy albums or your music. And do check out the Cannabis Coffee Hour on Patreon and support Rob on that platform. Thank you again, Rob. I really love talking to you. That is Rob Cantrell, Season 1 of Last Comic Standing, and a lot of great stories from the San Francisco comedy scene, an era that I find in high esteem in the history of stand-up comedy. So thank you guys for being here. If you enjoyed this and think you know someone else who might be interested in listening to this show, we are available wherever you get your podcasts. That is on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, including the one that you use that I haven't mentioned yet. And if you listen to the show somewhere, I would love to hear from you. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can hit up the podcast on Twitter as well at AwesomeDPod. And I'm on Instagram at WillCarey23. And I would love to hear from you guys. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. And if you guys do want to check out some of the stuff that I'm doing over there, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. And I've been writing a lot of songs and doing quarantine versions of some of my original songs there. So you can check those out over on patreon.com before anyone else gets to hear them. And there's a lot of exclusive material that I do not put anywhere else that you can check out as well. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you guys stay safe. And I will hopefully see you in the future very, very soon. Be well, everyone. And I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, everyone.